Hi, and welcome to this episode of John's Model Kit Review. In today's fun classic model kit review, we'll be taking a look at the Lindberg Douglas F4D Skyray. This classic kit was first released in 1960, so it is truly a classic kit from a bygone era. In this review, we'll take a look at the plastic parts that come in the box. We'll talk about what is included with this kit. We'll also look at the surface detailing on the exterior of the kit, and we'll talk about the fit of the major parts. We'll also look at the detailing on the interior of the aircraft and on the smaller parts. And we'll go through the instructions and talk about any potential problem areas to watch out for with those. We'll also look at the decals that come in the kit. We'll also look at the clear parts that are included with the kit, and we'll talk about the clarity and fit of those. We now have the excellent Tamiya F4D Skyray kit, and we'll talk about how this kit compares to that one. Looking at the history of the F4D Skyray, it was a delta wing interceptor capable of a high rate of climb to permit rapid interception of approaching hostile bombers. The F4D was the first carrier-launched fighter to hold the world's absolute speed record, having a top speed of 753 miles an hour. It also set a new time-to-altitude record, flying from a standing start to 49,221 feet in 2 minutes and 31 seconds. The Skyray was declared ready for fleet introduction in April of 1956. It served with the U.S. Navy and the U.S. Marine Corps. The last Skyrays were withdrawn from service in February of 1964. Although the initial prototypes of the Skyray were powered by the J40 engine, this engine was later replaced by the Pratt & Whitney J57. I have to admit that I love the wacky designs of the early jet fighters, and I actually think the Skyray is one of the better looking aircraft of this era. It has almost a manta ray appearance in plan view, and I really like the clean lines of this aircraft. Armament on the Skyray consisted of 4 20mm cannon. It could also carry rocket pods, missiles, and bombs. During its relatively short service career, the Skyray never saw active combat duty. Looking at the instructions, this one sheet encompasses the entire assembly sequence and decaling sequence, but we're going to break this down and look at each step of construction individually. In step 1, we're assembling the engine and afterburner. In this particular kit, somebody had started construction and started to do some detail painting on the engine itself. The only thing you're going to see on the finished kit is the inside of the afterburner. I would highly suggest painting the inside of these parts prior to assembling them. In step 2, we're installing the engine inspection cover and the cover lock bar. Once again, this step of construction was already completed prior to me getting this kit. This is a bit of a toy-like feature, and it's common for kits of this vintage. In step 3, we're installing the engine in the left fuselage half. It's actually the opposite of the half that it's shown in this picture. In this picture, you can see the front of the engine that is visible through the intake. And in this picture, you can see what will be visible through the inspection hatch. In step 4, we're gluing the rudder halves together. And in step 6, we're installing those. I would suggest installing those prior to closing up the fuselage halves, especially if you're using liquid cement. Looking at the fit here, it doesn't look horrible, but the moving rudder and the moving ailerons are another toy-like feature of this kit. In step 5, we're gluing the fuselage halves together. And just holding things together, it looks like you should be able to get a pretty decent fuselage seam on the upper side of the model. You can see where the fuselage seam runs through the cockpit. This will need to be cleaned up a little bit. Here we can see the under fuselage seam, and it looks like we should be able to get a pretty decent fit all the way around. In step 7, we are gluing the wing panels together. In step 8, we're gluing the ailerons around the wing tabs. And in step 9, we are gluing the wings themselves to the body of the aircraft. The fit of the wing halves to one another looks pretty decent. Once again, the movable features are a little bit toy-like, and they somewhat compromise the fit of these parts. Fitting the wing halves into the body of the aircraft shows a very nice wing to fuselage seam. You shouldn't have any trouble with this step of construction. There's a lot going on in step 10. We're cementing the wing tank holders, the rockets, the landing gear, the wing tanks, and the nose spar in place. Here we can see the underwing fuel tanks and the fins for those. These are going to require a little bit of cleanup. Here we can see the underwing missile racks as well as landing gear. You can see there's a pretty major seam on most of these parts that will need to be cleaned up. And you want to just take your time on this step and make sure you have everything located properly prior to committing to glue. In step 11, we're cementing the pilot to the pilot seat and installing that in the aircraft, and then we're installing the canopy over that. Looking at the pilot figure, there's not a lot of detail here, and there is a significant mold seam to clean up. The same goes for the ejection seat. This is more of a cartoon caricature of what the ejection seat would look like. This is the cockpit opening, and the pilot and pilot seat are installed into the top of this opening. There's no sidewall detail or instrument panel per se. Looking at the cockpit transparencies, these don't look too bad. The framing is fairly clearly defined. These should look nice on the finished kit. Step 12 simply says to apply all decals. This picture is pretty much all you get for decal placement, in addition to the box art that shows the top of the plane. The plastic parts and the decals for this kit look like they are from the prototype of the F4D and not actually a production variant of the aircraft. Looking at the decals themselves, there's not a lot included here, and as you can see, they have yellowed pretty badly with age, so I would probably try to source these from the decal dungeon. The final step in construction is step 13, and it's the assembly of the display stand. This is just another feature familiar to those of us who have built the older kits. Looking at the surface detail on the exterior of the kit, there is some really fine detail here. I'm really surprised at how good the moldings are. It's a mix of engraved and raised detail with a lot of fine rivet detail as well. And this type of detail is actually more accurate than the fully engraved detail that we see on a lot of modern kits. With regards to realism, unfortunately, the toy-like aspects of this kit, the opening engine inspection panel, the movable ailerons, and the movable rudder detract somewhat from the realism of the finished kit. The detail on the smaller parts included in this kit also show their age. They're somewhat soft on detail, and most of them have a pretty significant mold shift seam that's going to need to be cleaned up prior to assembly. There's also no real aircraft interior to speak of. The instructions also show their age, and they don't provide a whole lot of detail as far as color callouts. And the assembly sequence for the underwing ordnance, for the landing gear, for the landing gear doors is very much glossed over. The decals themselves are somewhat simplified as well. There are no stencils included for the aircraft exterior. If you're looking for a definitive Skyray in 1/48 scale, I would definitely go with the Tamiya 1/48 scale F4D. It represents a production variant of this aircraft instead of the prototype that is represented in this Lindberg kit. The Skyray from Lindberg is really appropriate for modelers who are looking for a nostalgia build, to build a model kit that they built when they were a kid. It's also appropriate for younger modelers who are just getting into the hobby, or older modelers who are returning to the hobby. It's got a fairly low parts count. It's molded in white plastic, so you wouldn't even have to paint the exterior of the kit if you didn't want to, and the fit overall isn't bad. I really do like the classic box art on the top of the box. I think that's so cool. And it's surprising for the size of the model how small the actual box is that it comes in. Well, I'd love to know what you guys think. If any of you have built the Lindberg F4D Skyray previously, please feel free to comment in the comment section below. As always, I hope you found this video entertaining and informative, and until next time, model on.